By the time Elvis Presley noticed the girl beside the piano, Sarah Mitchell had already started saying goodbye to her father in her head. Not at his funeral. Not when they lowered the coffin into the ground 7 months earlier. No. This was the real goodbye. Right here on the burning pavement of Beale Street, where she was about to sell the last thing he had ever truly loved, just to keep her family from becoming homeless. And what happened next would become one of the most emotional moments ever captured on camera, because the king of rock and roll was about to see himself in that broken 17-year-old girl. The Memphis heat was merciless. 98 degrees. The kind of heat that wrapped around your throat and made breathing feel heavy. Beale Street pulsed with life anyway. Blues guitars screamed from open bar doors. Tourists drifted across sidewalks, carrying cold drinks and laughing loud enough to drown out the street musicians. Neon signs buzzed. Smoke from barbecue grills floated through the air. Everywhere Sarah looked, people were spending money she would have done anything to have. And there she sat, beside a faded 1952 Kimball upright piano, with a cardboard sign that read, "For sale, $200. 4 hours. That was how long she had been sitting there. 4 hours of strangers slowing down just long enough to make things worse. Too old. Who buys a piano off a sidewalk? I'll give you $50. 50. Every low offer felt like somebody spitting on her father's grave. Sarah kept her eyes locked on the pavement because looking at people hurt too much now. Sweat rolled down the back of her neck beneath her dark ponytail. Her yellow sundress clung to her skin from the heat. The canvas sneakers on her feet were splitting open near the toes. She looked exhausted. Not tired, exhausted in the kind of way that happens when life keeps hitting someone who's already on the ground. The piano beside her looked old but proud. Its dark wood was scratched by time, yet every key still gleamed beneath the sunlight, because James Mitchell had treated that instrument like family. James Mitchell. Her father. The man who used to fill their tiny apartment with music every evening while dinner cooked on the stove. The man who never became famous even though he deserved to. Years earlier, James had played piano inside tiny Memphis recording studios alongside musicians chasing impossible dreams. He'd worked sessions near Sun Records during the golden age of rock and roll, helping shape songs that disappeared into history before anybody learned his name. He never complained about it. Music wasn't fame to him. It was survival, faith, air. After the studio jobs dried up, he became a piano teacher. $10 an hour, sometimes less if the parents couldn't afford it. And every single night after lessons ended, Sarah would climb onto the piano bench beside him while he guided her hands gently over the keys. Relax your fingers, sweetheart. Feel the song before you play it. Music ain't notes. Music is memory. Sarah remembered everything. The smell of coffee in the apartment, the squeak of the piano bench, the warmth of her father's laugh whenever she messed up. And most of all, she remembered Can't Help Falling in Love. That song belonged to them. Her father would sing while she played, badly, loudly, smiling the entire time. The last time they played it together was 3 days before he died. 3 days later, his heart gave out during Sunday service. 44 years old. Gone before Sarah even reached the hospital. After that, everything collapsed slowly. The life insurance policy had expired, rent stacked up. Her mother started working full-time at the fabric store until her feet swelled every night. Her younger brothers began collecting bottles for change without being asked. Then came the eviction notice. $600 overdue. Sarah still remembered the way her mother stared at that paper in silence, like it was a death sentence. So Sarah made a decision. Sell the piano, even if it killed her inside. At first her mother refused. That piano was your daddy's soul. But Sarah understood something adults never said out loud. You can't feed children with memories. Now here she was, 4 hours into humiliation, watching tourists spend more money on lunch than her family had left for the week. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, but she refused to cry. Mitchell women bend. Mitchell women don't break. That was what her father always said, but right now she felt dangerously close. Then suddenly, a shadow stopped in front of the piano. Black boots, black leather jacket, dark sunglasses despite the brutal heat. The man stood silently for several seconds, studying the instrument. Not casually, carefully, like he recognized something in it, something personal. Sarah forced herself to stand. "Afternoon, sir." The stranger looked at her gently. "That your piano?" "Yes, sir." "You play?" "A little." The man nodded slowly, then glanced down at the cardboard sign again. $200, he murmured quietly. "That all your daddy's music worth?" The question hit Sarah harder than she expected. She swallowed carefully. "It's not about worth." The stranger looked into her eyes then, really looked. And somehow that made everything worse because, for the first time all day, somebody seemed to notice she was barely holding herself together. Without another word, the man walked around the piano and sat down on the bench. Sarah blinked in surprise. Tourists nearby slowed down curiously. The stranger lifted the keyboard cover with delicate familiarity, resting his fingers softly against the worn ivory keys. Then he started playing. The first notes rolled through Beale Street like smoke. Low, haunting, beautiful. The noise around them faded almost instantly. People stopped walking. Conversations died. Even the musicians farther down the street seemed to disappear beneath the weight of those notes. Sarah felt goosebumps rise across her arms, because this man wasn't just playing music. He was remembering something through it. Something painful. Something old. His fingers moved effortlessly across the piano, while the melody carried heartbreak through the burning Memphis air. It sounded lonely enough to make strangers stop breathing for a second. And then Sarah noticed something terrifying. The man playing her father's piano sounded exactly like the records her dad used to play late at night. That same rhythm, that same southern soul, that same impossible voice hidden inside the keys. A crowd slowly formed around them. Nobody recognized him yet, but they could feel him. And Sarah suddenly realized this moment was becoming something much bigger than a girl trying to sell a piano. The man in the leather jacket finished the song slowly, letting the final note hang in the heavy Memphis air like it didn't want to disappear. Nobody around the piano moved. The crowd stood frozen beneath the burning sun, staring at the stranger with the dark sunglasses, and the girl beside him, whose eyes were already beginning to fill with tears she had spent 7 months trying not to cry. Then the man looked up at Sarah. "Your daddy taught you on this thing?" His voice was calm, soft, but there was something underneath it now, something heavier. Sarah nodded carefully. "Every day after school." The stranger ran his hand gently across the piano keys, like he was touching something sacred. "He must have loved you a whole lot." That sentence almost broke her, because nobody had said her father's name out loud in weeks. Nobody talked about him anymore. The world had already moved on, while Sarah still woke up some mornings expecting to hear piano music drifting from the kitchen. "He did," she whispered. The man studied her face for another second. "Where is he now?" Sarah tried answering immediately, but her throat locked shut. Her voice cracked hard enough to embarrass her. "He passed away." The stranger lowered his head slightly. Not fake sympathy, not polite sadness. Real understanding. "When?" "7 months ago. Heart attack." The crowd around them had gone completely silent now. Even the traffic farther down Beale Street sounded distant. Something about the scene felt strange suddenly, intimate, like the entire street understood they were witnessing somebody standing on the edge of breaking apart. The stranger looked back at the piano. "And now you're selling the last thing he left behind." Sarah stared at the sidewalk. "We need rent money." There it was, the truth, small, ugly, humiliating. The words hit the air like shattered glass. For a second, she hated herself for saying them out loud. But then something unexpected happened. The stranger nodded slowly like he already knew. "How much y'all behind?" Sarah hesitated. 600. "And this gets you 2? "Yes, sir." The man leaned back slightly on the piano bench, staring across Beale Street, as if he'd suddenly disappeared into another lifetime. When he spoke again, his voice sounded farther away. "When I was a boy," he said quietly, "my mama used to pretend she wasn't hungry, so me and my daddy could eat." Sarah looked up. The stranger smiled faintly, but it wasn't happiness. It was memory. "We were poor. Not television poor, real poor. Some nights all we had was beans and cornbread." He laughed softly under his breath. "Hell, sometimes not even that." The crowd listened carefully now. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. The stranger tapped one finger lightly against the piano keys. "I still remember hearing my mama cry at night when she thought I was asleep. That sound stays with a man forever." Sarah felt something twist violently in her chest, because she knew that sound, too. She'd heard her mother crying behind the bathroom door 3 nights earlier after opening another overdue bill. The stranger suddenly looked directly into her eyes. That kind of pain changes people. Sarah couldn't speak. You stop being a kid real fast when your family's drowning. The way he said it made her realize something terrifying. This man truly understood her. Not pity, not charity, understanding. And somehow that hurt more. A breeze drifted through Beale Street, carrying cigarette smoke and blues guitar through the crowd, while the stranger sat silently beside her father's piano like he belonged there. Then he asked the question that shattered what little strength Sarah had left. "You angry at him?" Sarah blinked. "At my father?" The stranger nodded slowly. "For leaving." The words hit like a punch to the ribs, because yes, God help her, yes. Sometimes she was angry. Angry he died. Angry he left her mother alone. Angry he left Sarah trying to become an adult before she even graduated high school. And the guilt from feeling that anger had been eating her alive for months. Tears instantly flooded her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered weakly. The stranger nodded carefully, like he already understood the answer anyway. "My mama died when I was young," he said quietly. "And for a long time I blamed God, blamed everybody." His jaw tightened slightly. "Truth is, when somebody you love disappears, your heart starts looking for somebody to punish." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks now. The stranger saw them immediately, and instead of pretending not to notice, he reached into his pocket and handed her a neatly folded white handkerchief. "You've been trying real hard not to cry today, haven't you?" That did it. The walls inside her collapsed completely. Sarah covered her mouth as the first sob escaped her chest. Not pretty crying, not graceful, the kind that comes from carrying too much pain for too long. Her entire body shook. The crowd looked away respectfully, and the stranger stayed right there beside her. No judgment, no awkwardness, just presence. "You know what your problem is, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Sarah shook her head through tears. "You think being strong means suffering quietly." She stared at him. "My mama taught me something different." His voice lowered gently. "Strong people cry too. They just keep going afterward." Sarah broke harder after hearing that. 7 months of fear, 7 months of pretending, 7 months of watching her mother slowly drown. All of it exploded out of her at once on that Memphis sidewalk. And the stranger let it happen. Then, suddenly, from somewhere deep inside the growing crowd, a woman gasped loudly. Her hand flew over her mouth. "Oh my God!" Heads turned. The woman stepped closer, eyes widening in disbelief as she stared at the man beside the piano. "Oh my God," she repeated shakily.
"That's Elvis."
The entire street froze. Sarah blinked through tears. No, impossible. But then the whispers started spreading through the crowd like fire. "Elvis Presley. That's Elvis. Holy hell." People began rushing closer instantly. The energy changed in seconds. Tourists shoved forward, voices exploded, someone screamed, and Sarah stood there trembling beside her father's piano as the stranger slowly removed his sunglasses and revealed the most recognizable face in America. The moment Elvis Presley removed his sunglasses, Beale Street exploded. People surged toward him from every direction, like a wave crashing through the sidewalk. Voices overlapped. Tourists shouted his name. A woman nearly fainted. Somewhere in the chaos, a local news cameraman abandoned his original assignment and pointed the lens directly at Elvis standing beside the crying teenage girl and the old piano baking beneath the Memphis sun. Nobody there understood it yet, but that camera was capturing the exact moment millions of people would later call the most human thing Elvis Presley had ever done. "Elvis! Elvis, over here! Can I get an autograph? Oh my God, it's really him." The noise became deafening, but Elvis barely reacted, because his attention stayed on Sarah. The girl looked completely frozen now. Tears covered her face. Her hands trembled violently around the white handkerchief Elvis had given her moments earlier. She looked less like somebody meeting the most famous man on earth, and more like somebody struggling to understand why kindness suddenly hurt so much. Elvis stepped slightly in front of her as the crowd pushed closer. Not like a celebrity protecting himself, like a man protecting somebody fragile. "All right now," Elvis said calmly, raising one hand toward the crowd. "Everybody breathe a little." Even in chaos, his voice carried control. warm, effortless, magnetic. The crowd eased slightly. Then Elvis turned back towards Sarah and glanced at the cardboard sign resting against the piano. For sale, $200. He stared at it for several seconds, and something changed in his face. Not anger, pain. Because suddenly he wasn't seeing a piano anymore. He was seeing his own mother clipping coupons at the kitchen table, his father coming home exhausted from another failed job, the tiny rooms in public housing, the nights hunger made sleep impossible. He remembered what desperation smelled like. And standing in front of him was a 17-year-old girl carrying that same weight in her eyes. Elvis slowly reached into the inside pocket of his leather jacket. Sarah watched him carefully, confused. The crowd quieted again. Elvis pulled out his wallet. Then he started counting bills. 100, 2, 3, 4. Sarah's breathing slowed. 5, 6, 7. People nearby exchanged stunned looks. 8, 9, 10. A full $1,000. Sarah's eyes widened instantly. "Sir, no." Elvis folded the money once and gently pressed it into her shaking hands. "This should help your mama breathe a little easier." Sarah immediately tried giving it back. "I can't take this. I can't." "Yes, you can." His voice wasn't loud, but it stopped her completely. Sarah stared at him speechless, while the crowd watched in absolute silence. "It's too much," she whispered. Elvis shook his head slowly. "No, sweetheart." He glanced toward the piano. "This is too much." Sarah looked confused. Elvis stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You were about to sell the last piece of your daddy because life got cruel." His eyes softened painfully. "That's too much." Sarah's lip trembled again. Elvis looked at the piano keys for a long moment before speaking. "You know what happens when somebody dies?" Sarah swallowed carefully. "Everybody says time heals things." He shook his head faintly. "That ain't true. Time just teaches you how to carry the pain without collapsing under it." The entire crowd had gone silent again. Even the cameraman lowered the lens slightly, mesmerized. Elvis pointed gently toward the piano. "But this right here," he said softly, "this helps carry him with you." Sarah's chest tightened violently. "That piano ain't furniture. It ain't wood and strings." Elvis looked directly into her eyes. "That's your father's fingerprints, his laughter, his soul. One day you're going to sit down at those keys and suddenly remember the sound of his voice so clearly, it'll feel like he never left." Sarah broke down crying again, harder this time, because deep inside, she knew he was right. Elvis carefully placed both hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me now," he said gently. "Don't sell your memories just because life got ugly for a little while." Sarah nodded through tears. The crowd around them looked emotional now, too. Several people were openly crying. One older man removed his hat quietly and wiped his eyes. Then Elvis smiled softly. "You play every day, you hear me?" Sarah laughed weakly through tears. "I'm not very good." Elvis raised an eyebrow dramatically. "Honey, neither was I when I started." The crowd laughed warmly. For the first time in months, Sarah smiled. A real smile. Small, broken, but real. and Elvis noticed immediately. "There it is," he said softly. "That's your daddy's smile right there." Sarah covered her mouth again as fresh tears came pouring out. At that exact moment, the local news camera zoomed closer and captured Elvis doing something nobody expected from the biggest celebrity in America. He hugged her. Not for cameras, not for attention. A real hug. The kind fathers give daughters when they know they're trying to stay strong for too long. And suddenly Beale Street didn't feel loud anymore. It felt sacred. Before leaving, Elvis leaned down beside the piano one final time and softly played the opening notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Sarah froze instantly, because that had been her father's song. Elvis looked up at her gently while his fingers rested on the keys. "Funny thing about music," he murmured. "People leave this world, but songs don't." Then he stood up. Security had finally arrived, struggling to control the growing crowd surrounding them. Fans screamed Elvis's name from every direction now. Cameras flashed endlessly. But before disappearing into the chaos, Elvis turned around one last time. "You tell your mama something from me," he called out warmly. Sarah wiped tears from her face. "What?" Elvis smiled. "Tell her she raised somebody brave." And then he was gone, swallowed by screaming fans, cameras, and Memphis noise. But Sarah stayed frozen beside the piano long after he disappeared, because for the first time since her father died, she didn't feel abandoned anymore. That night, Sarah walked into their apartment carrying the $1,000 in shaking hands, while her exhausted mother sat surrounded by overdue bills at the kitchen table. When Dorothy Mitchell saw the money, her face drained of color. "Sarah," she whispered fearfully, "where did this come from?" Sarah looked toward the old piano sitting quietly near the window. Then she smiled through tears. "You're not going to believe me." 3 days later, the footage aired across America. Within 1 week, over 12 million people had seen the video of Elvis Presley stopping on Beale Street to help a grieving teenage girl save her father's piano. Donations flooded in from everywhere. Strangers mailed letters. Churches sent checks. Musicians offered lessons. The eviction vanished. The bills disappeared. Hope returned. But Elvis did something even bigger afterward, without cameras, without interviews, without telling anyone. He secretly created a $25,000 music education fund in Sarah's name, because some people use fame to be remembered, and some people use it to remind hurting strangers they matter. Months later, Sarah performed publicly for the first time at her high school talent show using her father's piano. Her hands trembled when she sat down beneath the stage lights. Then she began playing "Can't Help Falling in Love." And somewhere deep in the crowd, her mother started crying before the first verse even ended, because suddenly it felt like James Mitchell was in the room again. Still listening, still smiling, still home.